Before I proceed my message, I would like to share with a humorous story. A story of a minister who parked his car in a non-parking zone in a large city because he was short of time and he couldn't find a space with a meter. So what he did was he put a note under the windshield wiper. This is what he wrote. I have circled the block 10 times. If I don't park here, I'll miss my appointment. Forgive us our trespasses. So when he returned, he found a citation from the police officer along with this note. This is what the police officer wrote. I have circled this block for 10 years. If I don't give you a ticket, I will lose my job. Lead us not into temptation. See, we use arguments and self-justifications to cover up our mistakes. Often we forget the same logic can become a weapon against us. So my message today evening, primarily addresses on an evaluation. What is our identity in Christ? When you use the word identity, there are a couple of thoughts you can come across. In a worldly terms or in a normal terms, we can say your identity determines your actions, especially in an established institutions like family or in a company. Your identity determines your actions. For example, being a father, you do the duties of a father. Or being a mother, you do the duties of a mother. Being a son, your parents will tell what to do. On the other side, you'll see sometimes your actions determines your identity, which comes in any temporary situation, just like in a college. You are in a college, or you are in any short-term relationship, or you are in friendship. In this scenario, your actions determines your identity. So people will call you as best friend because you did good things to that fellow. So they will call you best friend. Or if you are smart in your academic career, the teachers, the professors will call you, you are a smart student. What is a biblical principle? How Bible defines your identity? It's not based on your normal titles. It's not based on your actions, but the Bible determines your identity through the attitude that you have. Because the Bible always focuses on the relationship. So your identity is established through the covenant relationship with God. More interestingly, if you look at the scriptures carefully, our identity in the Lord, our identity in God needs to be updated with the revelation that we receive from God time to time. When you look at the letters of Paul in the New Testament, the reason I'm taking Paul because he wrote most of the letters in the New Testament. If you look at Paul's salutations, Paul's title, or the way Paul greet others, initially he say, I am the apostle. Then he say, I am the prisoner in Christ. I am the servant of Christ. As he progresses in his theological understanding, as he progresses in the revelation which he received, he humbled himself daily. That's what Tina was pointing towards. You need a humble heart. You need a humble eye. You need to do a humble walk. Look at David, because he's the one who wrote most of the Psalms in the whole pack of Psalms. In his daily life, he was humble himself. He was understanding. He is calling God as a very special terms. For these two, Paul and David, for them, their fantasy, ecstasy, and the supremacy all rooted in God. My simple question is, how unique your relationship with God? Do you have a unique relationship with Christ? Are you receiving a special revelation every day about God? I will take your attention to one of the Old Testament prophets. So before I introduce that person to your, I'll just give you a brief overview. In the Old Testament, the prophets were the representatives of God. This is the only office you will see from the beginning and till the end. Starting from Genesis to Malachi, this office remains the same. The priestly office only starts halfway through. And the king office, the office of a king, is starting only halfway through. But being a prophet, you see from the beginning, because that is a very important office in the Old Testament as well as in the New Testament. Because God entrusted prophets as the mouthpiece of God. Let me take your attention to a kind of awkward prophet in the Old Testament. It is none other than the prophet Jonah. I know everybody heard about Jonah. You might have seen a lot of pictures like Jonah in the belly of the fish. I have seen funny pictures of Jonah as well as, horrifying pictures of Jonah. In some pictures, Jonah in the belly of the fish with a candle. I don't know from where he got the candle. In some pictures, Jonah in the belly of the fish with a lot of skull and bones and kind of darkness. And it's like, I also seen, a lightning bug. A light bug even in the belly of the fish, and Jonah is trying to catch it. So both frightening as well as humorous and threatening images of Jonah in the belly of the fish we all seen. Let me take you to the last chapter of book of Jonah. It's a tiny little book in the Old Testament. Jonah chapter 4 verses 9 to 11. I'll read for you from New American Standard Version. Then God said to Jonah, "Do you have good reason to be angry about the plant?" And he said, "I have good reason to be angry, even to death." Then the Lord said, "You had compassion on the plant for which you did not work and which you did not cause to grow, which came up overnight and perished overnight. Should I not have compassion on Nineveh, the great city in which there are more than 120,000 people who do not know the difference between their right and the left hand, as well as many animals?" This story of Jonah is common in three major faiths. You see the same story in Judaism, you see the same story in Islam, you see the same story in Christianity. Even our Lord Jesus Christ attested this story as an historical event than a mythology. And this story is also attested by archaeological evidences. So the book of Jonah is canonically comes between Obadiah and Micah, if you find difficulty to find where this book is located. So you can find it between Obadiah and Micah. Chronologically, this prophet comes between the great prophet Elisha and Isaiah. So, and he is the contemporary of Amos, Joel, and Hosea. So these prophets were very bold people. So the big boys in the Old Testament. Literally looking this prophecy in this book, it's a narrative by nature, and also it's a short story. It's a prophetic literature with a Thanksgiving psalm. Fascinatingly enough, this book is not promoting Jonah as a hero. It's not promoting Jonah as a hero. Rather, this book shows Jonah's shame, Jonah's blame, and Jonah's claim. These three are totally against God. If I want to give you a biographical sketch of Jonah, I will just quickly go through this. He lived in 8th century in Israel, not in Judah. He was the son of Amittai. He is from the village of Kath Hefer, which is 5 kilometers north of Nazareth and 1 kilometer from Cana. So you can get a picture of where these two places in the New Testament. He is from the tribal district of Zebulun. So in Genesis 49:13, the Jacob, when he gave the blessing for the Zebulun, this is what he said: "Zebulun will dwell at the seashore." So Jonah is living in a seashore. That's where he can easily find a ship and escape from the presence of the Lord. The question is, why God? I know all of you know the story. That's why I'm just skipping from here to there. So I'm reading these verses sporadically so that you can connect the thought which I am going to give you. So why did God selected this prophet who is very awkward in nature and totally disobedient and always running away from the presence of God? He is the only Old Testament prophet from the Galilean region. There is no other prophet in the Old Testament from Galilee except Jonah. Because the speciality of Galilean region, here he occupies the large amount of the lot of non-Hebrew people are located in this particular area. So Jonah is so familiar with the foreign thoughts and customs. Let me give you a quick application. When God called you for a particular mission, when God called you to do something, there is a reason behind it. Because only you can do that particular thing. Your life experiences, your failures, your successes, your genetic makeup, your friendship, your knowledge, your dexterity, all leads to a particular mission which God is leading to. Fascinatingly enough, he is the only minor prophet that Jesus referred. And at the end of the sermon, I'll give you a brief idea how Jonah and Christ is connected, but in a very contrasting way. God called this funny prophet for a special mission. He called him and said, you have to convey the message of destruction to the city of Nineveh. Here is the first verse. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and cry against it. It's so funny that in this book, everybody is crying because of Jonah. Then the verse continues, for their wickedness has come up before me. I'd like to introduce only one Hebrew word, that is ra'ah. The word ra'ah means evil. And this word plays a great role in this passage. So ra'ah, God is telling to the prophet Jonah that I am going to send ra'ah, I'm going to destroy this city because the people are very much evil. They are ra'ah. So God is sending ra'ah because the people are ra'ah. Ra'ah basically means evil, punishment, and such kind of things. Verse 3, but Jonah rose up and fled to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. So he went down to Joppa. You remember the place of Joppa in the Acts of Apostles, where Apostle Peter received the vision and called for his first Gentile mission to Cornelius. Here Jonah is getting the vision and call for another Gentile mission. But this fellow moved from Joppa to Tarshish. And he found a ship at Joppa, which is going to Tarshish. And he paid the money. See how scripture is narrating the story. He paid the money. That means he is illegally okay, so that there is no reason to take him out of the ship. He knows God, okay? So the inspector comes, if he's not paying, then he will be again back to the God's idea of going to Nineveh, right? So he paid the fare. He went into it to go with them to Tarshish from the presence of God. So the Tarshish is, for an Israelites, that's the farthest area they can go. Just like people who live in Toronto, see Oshawa as the farthest end of the GO station, like this is the farthest area. In the same way, the people in Joppa, for them, the farthest area, the end of the world is Tarshish. So he planning to move there, planning to go there. Let me give you a brief encounter of how this city of Nineveh is. If you look at the Old Testament, city of Nineveh was built by Nimrod. Hope at least few of you might have remembered the person by the name Nimrod. He is a hunter. He was a mighty warrior who built the Tower of Babel and led the world into a rebellious action against God that you see in Genesis chapter 10. And Nineveh was a large city, in fact, larger than Babylon. During Jonah's time, Nineveh was not the capital city. Later on, this became the capital of Assyria. So in Jonah chapter 3, verse 3, you'll see this city, it is 64 miles around. So Jonah is unable to accept the call of God. There are three problems happen with Jonah. Number one, he lost the sense of responsibility. Or in a very common term, I can call it as he misunderstood the call of God. A prophet is supposed to be obedient and supposed to follow the voice of God, but this guy doesn't want to follow the voice of God. He doesn't want to be responsible in God's sight. Every mission proceeds from the divine vision than perception. Because the former one, the vision is based on supernatural and perception is based on natural, it's based on your senses. Jonah is from Israel, so he heard the ministry of Elisha. And even some Jewish rabbis says he was one of the prophets who stayed with Elisha. So he might have heard the story of Naaman, the Syrian general and leper, who was healed. So that means he understood God's love for other nations. So he might also understood, or he might have also heard that there will be an exile in the future by the Assyrians. So in Jonah's perspective, the Assyrians or the Ninevites are enemy to Israel. So these things made Jonah to move to Tarshish, the opposite direction, the farthest direction that he could go. Then what happened? He get into the ship, and there is a great wind. God appointed a great wind, and finally everything is in trouble. The sailors are in trouble, and then the sailors were looking for the solution. Then finally they cast the Lord, and Jonah's name came up, and they looked at Jonah and they asked 6 questions to Jonah. Question number 1, on whose account has this calamity struck us? Tell us the truth. What is going on? Second, what is your occupation? What do you do? Third, and where do you come from? Fourth, what is your country? And the 5th question, from what people are you? What is your citizenship? And the 6th question, how could you do this? Jonah gave the answer. I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord of heaven who made the sea and dry land. So he knows who God is. This sentence which Jonah pronounced gives 4 basic ideas. Number 1, he is telling that I know that I am called for a purpose. Second, I know that who created me. Third, I know that I am created for a purpose. And fourth, I know that I have to be obedient to my calling. You know what happened to this story? After hearing the answer from Jonah, the sailors are looking at Jonah and said, how could he do this? Being a man who called by a sovereign God who created the entire world, how can you disobey such a God? At that point in time, the sailors are recognizing the importance of his mission. This is not the first time this question arises in the Bible. This question dawned from Genesis. Even in Genesis chapter 3, verse 13, God said to Adam and Eve, "What have you done, guys?" And in Genesis chapter 12, verse 18, the Pharaoh said to Abraham. And in Genesis 26:10, Abimelech said to Abraham. And in Genesis 29, verse 25, Jacob said to Laban. And in Exodus chapter 14, verse 11, Israelites said to Moses, "What have you done?" In all these circumstances, this question shows a kind of, this is how the question can be framed. Why did you cheat at me, or why did you betray the trust? Here, the sailors are looking at Jonah's face and asking the same thing. How can you betray the trust of such a sovereign God? And even Jonah's answer, he say, "I fear the Lord." In Hebrew concept, the word fear of the Lord, it's in dual nature. It's in two dimensions. Number one, the dimension number one, it's like, I know God can punish people. The punishment or the judgment of God. And the second dimension is the glory of God. So it is both positive as well as negative sense. You know, the sailors are much, much better than Jonah. I wish God could have selected one of the sailors and sent to Nineveh. Because they were praying when the storm is raging all over the area. But Jonah was sleeping. You know, when you look at this story, there are three fears that you see in the life of the sailors. You see a fear of ignorance, chapter 1, verse 5, because they have no idea what is happening, what is happening to the sea. So when they heard Jonah is the cause for all this storm, they started with a fear of respect. Verse 10. And here the word used is used in those two areas, the fear of ignorance and fear of respect, the word Elohim, the general name of God. Then these people are, they are really troubled. They said, what to do? Then Jonah said, throw me overboard. Why did Jonah jump from the ship? He was too lazy. So he's telling you guys can throw me overboard, then it will be solved. He knew what is the answer. Now, if you read that passage, you see now the sailors are feeling guilty. Like, they are praying to God, God, please forgive us. This is the only way to solve this issue, calm the raging sea. So they throw Jonah from overboard. And the issue is solved. And when the sea is calm, then you see these people having a proper understanding of who is Yahweh. Now the word God, which denotes Yahweh, that word is used instead of Elohim. So that incident made sailors to believe in God. See how a disobedient prophet led people to Christ, led people to God. So in the mission, God is always looking for availability, not your ability. If you are available in the presence of God, if you are willing to sit in the presence of God, God can use you mightily. You look at any of the Old Testament characters, they were not intellectual giants. They were not powerful people that you think. And fascinatingly enough, God called Gideon as the mighty warrior who was hiding, in fact. And Moses is known as the eloquent prophet. What about his tongue? See, God always chooses the disabled, the unqualified for His glory. Because when they stand before the audience, when they stand before the people can understand these people are filled with the power of God. Otherwise, it is not possible. That is the reason God chose Peter to be the preacher in the day of Pentecost. He is an ordinary fisherman. He brought a good sermon and 3,000 people came to Christ on the spot. That was the first mega crusade in the world. Here in Jonah's case, he is constantly denying the voice of God. God was giving a lot of reminders one after another, but he is not willing to listen. Dear ones, we are called to share the good news of God. Sometimes in our life, if we are disobedient, God will give some kind of punishments. God will give some kind of reminders, some kind of loss in our life, some kind of trouble in our life. It is to show that come back to the same mission which I called you. The second problem that he faced was he lost the sense of reliability. He was not depending on God. He misunderstood the overall plan of God. In Jonah's case, the plan of God was his agenda. He was trying to bring his agenda over God's plan. His personal thought was actually over the God's plan. You look at the scripture, you can clearly see God asked him to go up. God said, arise, go and cry. But this fellow is going down. First, if you look at the wordplay in that passage, first you see he descended to Joppa. He down to Joppa. And the second word you see, he down into the ship. Then you see he down into the sea. Then you see he down into the belly of fish. God asked him to go up, go up, go up. And this fellow is going down and down and down. But God is so smarter than Jonah. You know what God did? He appointed a big fish. It's quite fascinating, Jonah's style of life. And now if you compare with his life in the ship as well as in the belly of the fish, it's quite different. On the ship, he's going away from the land, right? And he was sleeping. And he was prayerless. But when he got into the belly of the fish, he is going towards the dry land. He's not going away from the land, he is going towards the dry land. And he was not sleeping. He was awake. He was not only awake, he was praying. God just made a little bit of adjustment in the plan. See, sometimes God will give us certain situations in life. It is to prepare us. I'm not telling that you all are disobedient, but sometimes we are unable to recognize that we are disobedient. It happens. Our understanding sometimes overplay than God's plan. So God will bring you down to a level and you can sit and understand what is God's plan in my life. As I think I preached 5 years back, I was preaching a sermon about how God used nature to teach certain lessons in life. God used the fish to teach lessons to two people. Number one, God used the fish lesson to teach Jonah how to be humble and come back to the track of God. Because I told you already, Jonah is from a seaport, okay, a sea town. So the Nineveh is a place, if you take the cuneiform sign, the old pattern, the sign language, the word Nineveh is a combination of two signs. The one sign is called Ku, Ku, which denote fish. And the other one is S, Es, which denotes house or place. So if you combine these together, you see Nineveh as a place of fish. But he never thought that a person can survive in the belly of the fish for 3 days. And God can use that as a prayer room to prepare his person. And in Peter's case, Peter is a fisherman, right? He knows the nook and corner of Galilee, the Sea of Galilee. But Peter never thought that a fish can become a purse. Because you see in Matthew chapter 17, verse 27, Peter doesn't have money to pay the taxes. So he's telling Jesus, Jesus, we don't have money to pay the taxes. And Jesus said, you go and fish. So you get a fish and you open the mouth of the fish, just you open the purse, you will get the coin and pay the tax. So Jonah never thought there is a prayer room in the belly of the fish. Peter never thought the fish can become a purse. You know, God uses in different ways which we cannot imagine. His ways are higher than ours. His thoughts are higher than ours. Second illustration, second imagery that you see, the water imagery. God used the water for destruction as well as the water to save people. You see in Genesis chapter 1, God separated the water above and below. Above the firmament, there is some water. You have any idea why God separated the water and kept something above the firmament? So if you read the flood account in Genesis, in Noah's time, it clearly says God opened the windows of the heaven and it started raining for 40 days and 40 nights. So those water God used for destruction. And you also read the Egyptian account, the account of Moses, where the people of Israelites were standing near to the Red Sea. They have no way to go back because the Egyptian army, the strongest army of that time, they are approaching. And God used the same water to separate. Moses never thought there is a way underneath the sea. You know, these people, they might have really enjoyed because nobody builds such a big size aquarium in life. Can you imagine? A very big aquarium with the AC, with a dry land. It's not muddy land. It's a dry land. And people were walking slowly, enjoying the beauty as if they are in an excursion. And God led them through. You see how God is making such a route. You know, God's plan for us is higher than we imagine. Here in Jonah's chapter, the book of Jonah, you see God appoint the fish to teach a lesson. God appoint a plant to teach a lesson. God appoint a worm to teach a lesson. And God appoint an east wind, send an east wind to do his will. But this fellow, he doesn't want to know the plan of God. He just wants to keep on his plan. And the third problem that he faced, he lost the sense of reality. He was running away from God. Basically, what happened? He misunderstood the love of God. First, he misunderstood the call of God. Then he misunderstood the plan of God. Now he is misunderstanding the love of God. In Jonah chapter 3, verses 3 and 4. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah the second time, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and proclaim to it the proclamation which I am going to tell you. So this big fish vomited Jonah on a dry land, and Jonah must have cleaned by himself. And he get up. Then the second time the word of the Lord came from God. Jonah, now you should go to Nineveh, the great city, and proclaim to the city what I'm going to tell you. So Jonah arose and went to Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly great city, a 3 days walk. Then Jonah began to go through the city 1 day's walk, and he cried out and said, Yet 40 days Nineveh will be overthrown. What a shortest prophecy. The 3 days imagery, here it is mentioned not about the size of Nineveh, because based on the archaeological findings, you can take only a couple of hours to excavate, to explore the entire city of Nineveh. But the 3 days here mentioned about a particular concept. If a king sent an emissary to a Nineveh, a place, he need to stay at the place at least for 3 days to get familiar with the customs, to get to know the people, and present the message in a proper way. Here the prophet is totally impatient. On the first day itself, he is proclaiming the message, looking into their eyes and said, you know, you guys, you're all going to die in 40 days. How do you feel? If some prophet, some renowned prophet, looking at your face, or maybe coming to our church and say, within a month, you all guys are going to die. How do you feel? The prophets were called to a particular reason, and they all have a particular style, and God has given them a particular style. If you look at the Old Testament prophecies, there is an oracular formula. I'll explain what it is. An oracular formula means every time you read a prophecy from Habakkuk or Micah or Zechariah, or you read from Ezekiel, Daniel, you see, thus says the Lord. That's called an oracular formula. But here you'll not see anything of that sort. He said, guys, you're going to die in 40 days. And here in Jonah's prophecy, he is not at all explaining why God is judging these people. What is the reason? If you read any of the Old Testament prophetic books, you clearly see, I'm going to judge you guys because of your wickedness, because of the evil. So there is no oracular formula. There is no reason for judgment. He's not mentioning any reason. And the third, he is not offering any solution at all. He's just saying, you're going to die in 40 days. But it is quite fascinating how God touched their heart. That if you read in chapter 3, verses 5 to 9, when people heard this, they don't know what to do. You know what they did? The people believed in God, and they called a fast. And they put on sackcloth from the greatest to the least of them. That's about the ordinary people. When the king heard this, He took 5 actions. First, he arose from his throne. Second, he laid aside his robe from him. He removed his pride heart. Third, he covered himself with sackcloth. He sat on the ashes. Fourth. Fifth, he issued a proclamation. That is why this is so important. I thought of calling this message as with this title, Clarity of the Message and the Dignity of the Messenger. So we have to be clear with the message that we preach. And we should hold the dignity to that message that you preach. So we live in a world where people are finding difficult to come to Christ because of our lifestyle. Our words and our life doesn't sync. Here, the king is issuing a proclamation saying that everyone has to fast, including the animals. Oh my God. I don't think any church in the world proclaimed that kind of fasting in any time. Including the pets need to fast without food and water. Can you imagine? Your livestock fasting without food and water. They also covered with sackcloth. By the way, in the Old Testament, sackcloth, which means it's a coarse material made of a black horse hair. So when you wear the sackcloth, you will become discomforted. So that you will not sleep because you are not taking food and water, your body is weak, there is a tendency to become sleep. So that comfort zone is being removed by sackcloth. So you will be a little disturbed. Then the king said, you have to earnestly call on God. Not merely pray, wholeheartedly you have to pray to God. And the fourth one, not only that, you have to turn from the wicked ways and violence. And in the last part, you can clearly understand how terrible, how dangerous, how pitiful this prophet is. This is what the king says. Who knows? God may turn and relent and withdraw his burning anger so that we will not perish. This poor king is thinking that we are going to do all these things. Maybe God will help us. Jonah is not giving a proper message. He is not addressing properly. See the pathetic situation, and he used the word, maybe God will help us. God will turn from wrath. The problem that happened with Jonah, that's all his selfishness. He wants things to be happen in his own ways. Dear one, the moment you limit the love, it becomes selfishness. In Jonah's case, he was only thinking about Israel. He doesn't want God's kindness to stretch over Assyria. Sometimes we do the same. We don't want other people to hear about God's love and receive the same happiness that you and I receive. That's why Jesus said, don't let your love to be selfish. Love your enemies. Love those who persecute you. Then only your love become holy. Your love become genuine. God showed mercy to Jonah. He was running from all the way, starting from Joppa. He was running away from God, making all the problems, but still God showed mercy. God showed mercy to Jonah to teach the mercy of God. You know, the only time Jonah was happy in his life, that's in verse 4, verse 6. So the Lord appointed a plant, and it grew up over Jonah to be a shade over his head to deliver him from his discomfort. And the Jonah was extremely happy about the plant. When the people are repented, when the people know God, when they are get rid of their evil ways, Jonah is not happy. What a kind of prophet he is. You should know there are 10 miracles God showed exclusively to Jonah. He showed a great wind, and you see when the sailors were casting the Lord, it falling on Jonah. Then there is a great calm in the sea. Then Jonah in the belly of the fish. Then Jonah survived from the belly of the fish. And Jonah is like 3 days in the belly of the fish, and the fish vomits. Then you see the entire country coming back to God. And you see a great plant, and it withers. And God appoints a worm. And God sending an east wind. All these 10 miracles just before the eyes of Jonah to understand, I am the God, you are just a human. But Jonah is not willing to listen to any of these things. And in Jonah chapter 4, verse 2, he ironically identifying with Moses in his prayer. He's copying a prayer from Exodus chapter 34, verse 6. I knew that you are gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger, abounding in loving kindness. And he had one more line, just like Joel chapter 2, verse 30. And one who relents concerning calamity. This is what Jonah is saying. I know exactly what you're going to do. I will preach. Then you will change your mind. You're not going to destroy the city. Then the people thinking that I'm not the prophet, then my reputation will go. You see how Jonah's mind is operating in a different way. And in chapter 4, verse 3, now he is connecting with another biblical character. Now he selects isolation instead of reconciliation with God. And he unworthily prays like Elijah. Please take my life from me, God. For death is better to me than life. I don't want to live. I just want to die. Now God said to Jonah, do you have any good reason to be angry? For that, Jonah is not giving any answer. Instead of giving the answer, this guy goes to the east side. It's interesting. Initially, he moved from Joppa to Tarshish. Tarshish is actually located in the west. Now he's going back to the east. You know, in the Bible, the east is showing the rebelliousness and the selfishness. In the book of Genesis, when Adam and Eve were cast out of the Garden of Eden, they moved to east because of the rebelliousness. And when the Cain was killed, Abel, he moved to east. Nimrod moved to east to build Babel. And Lot moved to east in order to fulfill his selfish desires. And Jonah moved to east, and he made a shelter. And he was sitting under the shade, and he was watching for the destruction of the city. This fellow doesn't have any compassion at all. Timothy Keller penned these words in his book, The Prodigal Prophet, about compassion. I found it's very interesting. It's very useful. I know it's a little lengthy, but it's really helpful. There are many people who have no idea what they should be living for or the meaning of their lives. nor have any guide to tell right from wrong. God looks down at people in that kind of spiritual folk, that spiritual stupidity, and does not say, "You idiots." When we look at people who have brought trouble into their lives by their own foolishness, we say things like, "Serves them right," or we mock them on social media. What kind of imbecile says something like this? When we see people of other political party defeated, we just gloat. This is all a way of detaching ourselves from them. We distance ourselves from them partially out of pride and partially because we don't want their unhappiness to be ours. God doesn't do that. Real compassion, the voluntary attachment of our heart to others, means the sadness of their conditions makes us sad. It affects us. That's deeply uncomfortable, but it is the character of compassion. Here, this prophet, he is looking for his own comfort. He is not looking at the people. The prophet is again saying, "I just want to die. I don't want to live." As I said at the beginning, the people were Ra'ah. They were in the evil stage. And God is about to send Ra'ah, the punishment, to these people. Because people are repented, they are out of Ra'ah. God stopped Ra'ah, the evil. Now what happened to Jonah? Jonah became Ra'ah. Now Jonah became evil. I'll tell you something. When God leads you to a particular direction, when God asks you to do something, if you are running away from Him, there is a time you will become evil and the evil people become good. And you will still do all sort of justification in your life. So we have to be very careful. If you are running away from God, I ask you to come back and surrender your life to God. I'll close in 10 minutes. Then God said to Jonah in verse 9, 4 verse 9, "Do you have a good reason to be angry about the plant?" And he said, "I have good reason to be angry, even to death." Then the Lord said, "You had compassion on the plant for which you did not work and which you did not cause to grow, which came up overnight and perished overnight. Should I not have compassion on Nineveh, the great city in which there are more than 120,000 people who do not know the difference between the right and the left hand, as well as many animals?" God is looking at the face of Jonah and us, telling us, "Jonah, this is my people. I created them with a love and special care. If you are concerned about the soulless spirit, soulless plant, what about the souls in that land?" For Jonah, neither the clarity or the dignity doesn't matter. He was just bringing his own idea over God's. We see three things in Jonah's life. He was lost the sense of responsibility. He didn't understood the call of God. He lost the sense of reliability. He understood the plan of God. He lost the sense of reality. He misunderstood the love of God. He only thought the love of God is only for Israel. If you look at Jesus' life, he sensed the responsibility. He understood the call of God. Jesus understood there is no one in heaven or earth can replace his mission. That's why, as Philippians 2 verse 5 says, he emptied himself. and he came down as a normal personality, even as a notorious criminal, to save you and me from the clutches of sin. He sensed the reliability. He trusts in the will of God. In the Garden of Gethsemane, when he prays, he said, Father, not my will, but thy will be done. He understood what he's going to face, but he also sensed the reality. He understood the love of God. That's why John writes in chapter 3, verse 16, for God so loved the world. That means God loved the world. God loved you and me more than his son Jesus. That's why God sent his son on the cross to save you and me. Are you willing to be an instrument in the hands of God? Are you willing to be an instrument in the hands of God who is identifying with his call because his call is special? Are you willing to be an instrument in the hands of God who is merging with his will because his will is spectacular? Are you willing to be an instrument in the hands of God who can stand with his love because his love is sparkling? I just heard a hymn. This is what the hymn writer says. The love of God is greater far than tongue or pen can ever tell. It goes beyond the highest star and reaches to the lowest hell. The guilty pair bow down with care. God gave his son to win. His erring child he reconciled and pardoned from his sin. O love of God, how rich and pure, how measureless and strong. It shall forevermore endure, the saints and angels' song. What is your life today? Are you running away from God? Are you running away from the call of God? Or are you willing to obey the call of God, whatever happens in your life? Brethren, as Sister Shima pointed out, we live in end times. People are dying every day. People are living in depression. People are living in uncertainty, as Alexandra was pointed out. Will you raise hallelujah in the midst, in the presence of the enemies? That word gives another meaning. One is, God will bless you in the midst of the enemies. Second, you will be blessed and your enemies will see your lifestyle and come to grips with the knowledge of God. In the Old Testament, you see enemies, but in the New Testament, you will not see enemies. Because Jesus said, love your enemies so that they will know who God is. Are you willing to go to Nineveh? Or are you willing to go to Tarshish and fulfill your dreams? What is your priority? Fulfilling your dreams or God's dreams? If you give your hands in the hands of God, God can take all your disadvantages and turn it into advantages and use it for his glory. May God richly bless you. Thank you for giving me a hearing.